Fair, accurate, to the point. This is Face the State on Montana's news station.
Hello and welcome to Face the State. I'm John Shearer in the Lamar Valley of Yellowstone National Park. You might be able to see some bison out across the Lamar River off in the distance. The reason we're here today? Not so much the bison, although that is a big part of it. Instead, it's this. This solar array at the old Buffalo Ranch here in the Lamar Valley is going to allow the ranch and the associated teaching facilities that are connected with it to be completely energy independent. It's not like they aren't already, because this is an area that's off the grid. The power lines just don't come this far. In the past, the park has had to rely on diesel or propane generators to provide power out here. That's not the greatest solution in the world for such a pristine wilderness.
So Yellowstone has always been a leader in environmental stewardship.
Lynn Chan is a ranger and an engineer who's helping to design environmentally friendly power systems in the nation's first national park. Her husband Brian is the ranger in residence at the Buffalo Ranch. He lives there, in this house, and has to deal with power issues in this remote outpost every day.
Yeah, what it'll do is provide power for the whole compound, electric power. And what is located here, we have a couple facilities, residences for rangers to live here. And then also the Yellowstone Institute. And Yellowstone Institute is the primary user in terms of numbers out here. All the students that come and take classes for the Yellowstone Institute stay on campus for a couple days to a week taking classes. So this array and the system will provide power for the whole compound.
And how's this better than what you had before?
Yeah, well, when we first were out here, it was the institute was a lot smaller then, but it was a diesel generator, and we had two diesel generators, one backing up the other. Old hand crank, single-stroke diesel generator that was thumping around 24 hours a day. Providing electricity for the compound. We've since expanded, or the Institute has expanded a little bit in terms of the buildings, providing a few more classes. So this will help us to provide the power for the residences, the bathhouse, the bunkhouse, their classrooms, while they take classes. Yeah.
So I imagine that old diesel generator, I mean, you had an issue with like fuel spill, and I mean, it just probably didn't fit in with the green.
Yeah. Fortunately, spills, we were fortunate enough not to have too many of those, but they're, dirty, noisy generators. Once you turn off the generator, it just makes such a difference out here in terms of the quality of experience, as well as for visitors traveling through the Lamar Valley. There's just no sound at all.
Lynn Chan says this Lamar project is a key starting point for the park's sustainability program.
We saw Lamar as an ideal place to really focus on that and make it a prime example of sustainability. It's a historic district.
Well, the Lamar Buffalo Ranch was founded in 1907.
Karen Kress is the president of the Yellowstone Park Foundation.
And the ranch was built in the early 1900s, and it's the place where conservation of bison really started. There were very few bison left after the 1800s and early 1900s, and they created this incredible herd that exists now. So that's really the history of the Lamar Buffalo Ranch. But over the years, it has become not just a ranger station, it has become an education resource for the park and for visitors. So right now, Yellowstone Association uses it for a lot of their trips and workshops and courses, and the park uses it for Expedition Yellowstone.
It's also prime wildlife habitat and a big wildlife viewing area for the park. It's also off the grid, and it is an education center for the park. So what happened was, the Buffalo Ranch has been on renewable energy for almost 20 years. 1996 was our first solar panels that we put in here, and also battery storage at that time. But 20 years later, those systems were at the end of their useful life, particularly the batteries. So we worked through the Yellowstone Park Foundation, working with corporate partners to try and look at how we could update the system and also improve the system.
And of course, this project never would have happened at all had it not been for the Yellowstone Foundation. They were instrumental in pulling all the companies together to make this project happen and in finding funding for the parts that had to be paid for in cash.
Well, the Yellowstone Park Foundation has had a very strong relationship for almost 20 years with Yellowstone National Park, and we have been actively engaged in what we call the Greening Yellowstone initiative. So over the years, we funded a lot of sustainability efforts within the park, and we also have funded 2 different symposiums that helped the park create a strategic sustainability plan with our corporate partners. So we brought corporate partners together with people from MSU, with the park staff, with the foundation staff to put together the sustainability strategic plan. And out of the second symposium came this idea of really making the Lamar Buffalo Ranch a very significant national project, taking this historic ranch, which is used for education, adult and youth education, and making it a teaching tool for all the groups that come there. So for instance, there are 2 phases to it. Phase 1 is the one that was just completed. Phase 2 will be the micro hydropower portion of it. So back to phase 1, the significance of what has been done there is pretty mind-blowing, actually. Toyota, one of our board members, out of that last symposium a year ago, came up with the idea of, wouldn't it be a wonderful way to be able to reuse hybrid batteries from hybrid vehicles. And so obviously Toyota has a lot of those batteries, and what they're doing is test piloting this at Lamar. It's working. So they brought in other partners, Toyota. They've been a strong partner for the foundation for many, many years, and they brought in other partners like Sharp, Solar World, and Indy Power Systems. And those partners donated to the foundation the solar panels. Toyota has donated the batteries, which will store the solar energy to power Lamar. And then Indy Power Systems has come up with the controls that are going to be a real teaching moment. They're going to be in the various buildings in Lamar, and those controls will be able to teach people how much energy they're using, so they can really look at the energy efficiency in each of the cabins and the buildings there.
Our ultimate goal, we looked at the whole campus as far as all of the energy that it uses, including all of the propane that is used here. So there's a lot of use of propane, even though our electric grid is renewable. We use propane for hot water and heating because they're high energy loads. And so once we had looked at the whole campus and calculated where we needed to be, we set a goal for ourselves for 0 fossil fuels for daily operations. So that means that in the future we hope to not hear the sound of the generator at all. It would only come on in the case of an emergency or if something happened to our renewable system. So looking forward, this is a fantastic first phase of our system here, and we're able to generate a lot more electricity than we had before. And what we'd like to do is to look at building renovations to introduce energy conservation and see if we can make the buildings more energy efficient, as well as introduce a micro hydro unit to the area to complement this system.
Can you tell me a little bit about that micro hydro project? That'll go in the creek that runs right behind us here, right?
It won't actually go in the creek because that's more impact to the environment than we in Yellowstone would like to do. So we were lucky here in that the domestic water for the ranch comes from a spring up the valley there, and it is already piped in a domestic water pipe outside of the stream area. So we will tap into that domestic water pipe, and we'll use the water that comes to the ranch already in that pipe, so we're not making any impacts to the stream. And through that, we looked at all of the head and the flow of that water, and we calculated that we can generate 4.5 kilowatts through water power here at the ranch.
When you guys started putting this in, you kind of chose this spot carefully. Can you explain a little bit about why these panels are where they are?
Yeah, we're in the old buffalo corrals, actually, from when the buffalo ranch was first established to reestablish the bison herd here. We're in a little draw here, and we specifically put the panels here so that they're not visible as visitors are traveling on the road and through the Lamar Valley, just to cut down on the visual intrusion. We like to showcase what we're doing in some senses, but we want to showcase in words maybe what we're doing, as opposed to having panels out there. So yeah, we deliberately put these down low so that it's a very minimal visual intrusion to visitors as they're visiting the park.
We also spoke with someone who hopes this is just the first of many similar projects in the park. That would be Steve Yobst. He's the assistant park superintendent.
But there's a lot of human activity, both with visitors as well as park operations. You know, we drive vehicles, we burn heating fuel, we generate waste, and so the fancy word is, I think, anthropometric, but that essentially the consumption of natural resources by man, and at least park operations, needs to be addressed. There's federal mandates with regard to, as a federal agency, what we should be doing, but regardless, the greening program in Yellowstone really got started in earnest back, a grassroots effort in the mid-90s, and regardless of mandates, I think there's because of our mission, there's also consciousness, if you will, by park employees that we don't just throw everything away and we don't recycle, and we need to be concerned about the amount of fuel we burn, how many miles we drive, and things like that. So the greenest park is not just about bragging rights. We have an opportunity here because of the incredible partnerships we have, where we're located, of national forests, as well as Grand Teton National Park to our south. You know, there's great synergy as well as capacity to really do some things that are innovative, that are the right things to do to move us in the right direction of reducing our carbon footprint.
The park is only going to be able to get federal funding for maintenance and operations. So we don't fund maintenance and operations, but we provide things way above and beyond. And this is a project that is significant in that regard.
I would like to see our vehicle fleet move at a faster pace, if you will, towards hybrid and electric and alternative fuel vehicles. And we've increased the percentage of our fleet that's gasoline battery powered hybrid vehicles. Some of that has been through help from Toyota donating some of our vehicles. But then we've been able to purchase some through a program, federal government, GSA Fleet Management. But regardless of that, there are some fuels that we wish we had access to, like natural gas. But natural gas is a ways away from us. And so the cost associated with that, it makes it infeasible. But what's I think, where we're in a good place is that that's all changing. And natural gas came to Jackson, Wyoming, as an example, a decade ago. So at least it's there, and that doesn't help us that much. But someday it'll probably come to Gardner, Montana, and then potentially into the park, or where we could have a fueling station. And so that's my highest priority is fleet management. We as a park staff, whether it's garbage collection, road patrol, going around the park doing educational programs, our fleet cumulatively is driven 3.5 million miles a year. Now you think about, let's pick an average fuel consumption, and we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on diesel and conventional gasoline. and I can't remember what the gallons are, but think about a 10% reduction, or a 20% reduction, or a 30% reduction, not only from a greenhouse gas standpoint, but there's a fiscal driver, if you will, reducing the cost to park operations. With many of things we do with regard to our greening program is right there along with doing the right thing environmentally.
The Buffalo Ranch also has a vision for the future, and it starts with the largest energy draws: hot water and building heat.
So what we'd like to do is, at the moment, the hot water is direct propane, because that's too much of a load for the electric grid. Now we've got more renewable power on board. What we'd like to do is change out those propane water heaters to electric, and the same with the heating systems, to bring them onto the electric grid and get off of direct propane.
Is this scalable to other parts of the park as well? Is this sort of where you start and then build out from here?
This is a fantastic prototype for what we can do elsewhere. It's a little bit unique because Lamar being off the grid, if we don't create new renewable energy, then we have to run on propane here. And so in other areas of the park, we are looking at more renewable energy opportunities where we can possibly do grid tie with solar and more hydro. And that's on a sort of a case-by-case basis as when opportunities come forward.
Toyota has provided a $50,000 grant for education. So they're thinking about the future, just like we like to think about the future of future stewards and making a difference. So this grant of $50,000 is going to be used for interpretive panels at Lamar, and to help tell the significant story that's making such a difference at that ranch. And then people who visit there or attend the classes and courses can go back to their communities and their families and spread that word of really strong sustainability.
We wouldn't be where we are today with most of our sustainability program without a partnership as an example. Our partnership with the Yellowstone Park Foundation, 19 years I think now. They've raised $85 million for high priority projects. The solar, and an example is not just cash, but in kind, and the Lamar Buffalo Ranch Solar Project is an example of that. They raised money for the construction contract phase of that, which included installation of bases for solar panels and things like that. But then we had Toyota and their partners, Indie Systems and Sharp Industries, and as an example, that provided the solar powers and the Camry hybrid batteries. And so it's there's a value to that, certainly. And so that's included in the $85 million. But they funded our first greenhouse gas inventory before I think almost anybody in the federal government was doing it. We had some forward-looking people on our board of directors for the foundation, and they spent $200,000 of their money to help us learn, number one, what the producers, if you will, around the park were that were contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, but then also a set of recommendations, many of which have been implemented. The solar system at Lamar was originally suggested in that report 8 years ago. Our right-sizing our fleet and going to alternative fuels, changes in our recycling program, and looking at source separation with regard to municipal solid waste in a park that generates 3,000 tons of that a year, and the hauling costs are significant. So again, many of those things we would just not have been able to stretch federal dollars, because our highest priorities are boots on the ground every day, paying the electric bill, the fuel bill, seasonal workforce that takes us more than double what we are with our year-round workforce, and our first priorities are day-to-day service to the visitor, resource protection, emergency medical, law enforcement, custodial operations, and things like that. And oftentimes, the desire's there, to make changes for the better of the environment as well as fiscally, but the money's not there.
And so what we will be able to do, we're working with MSU's engineering department to build out an education and monitoring program so that we at the ranch and eventually on the internet, on the web, will be able to monitor all of the buildings at the Buffalo Ranch here and look at how much energy they're using and how much energy we're generating, and put that on an interface that can be really easily understood by anybody who comes to the ranch or is interested in what we're doing here, and also meld it with the conservation ethics of Yellowstone and our natural resources and why we're doing this project.
The visitor knows more about what we're doing with regard to sustainability, knows more than they did 10 years ago, but I still think they could learn more, both with regard to what we're doing and why, but then also how that applies. It may apply to what they may want to do when they get back home. Not that people aren't recycling and driving more fuel-efficient vehicles, that's going on, but there are things that they can learn here because they're in a resource, they're a captive audience, and we can talk about what we do. The example being our concessioners, Delaware North and Xanterra Parks and Resorts, have reports they produce. They have a requirement for having an environmental program that meets certain goals and objectives, and so that's a partnership we have as well, to where there are certain things that they're doing because of their operation that are similar to ours or are not the same as ours, because the Park Service isn't in the food restaurant business, but they are. So there's a variety of ways we message what we're doing. Another example is on our website. Before people ever get here, they can learn about what they can do in Yellowstone with regard to recycling, or what we're doing with regard to reducing our usage of vehicle fuel and electricity. Our newspaper advertises, brags, if you will, about what we're doing. But the important thing there is how they can participate in that. And then we have an environmental education program where, whether it's a youth conservation corps that's here doing work projects in the summer, or our Expedition Yellowstone program, which is 4th to 8th grade, residential program we have during the school year, where they actually participate in a variety of sustainable practices. That's a little more in depth, but it touches them. And then back to Lamar Buffalo Ranch, having static displays at the ranch where there's 30,000 people over the course of a year that are taking courses involved in programs there, or just happening to stop in because it's a ranger station as well as a campus. That static display, but then we are also going to be able to, once we get some technological things worked out, be able to broadcast real time what is happening, the amount of energy that's being produced by the solar system, the usage and changes in that, to places like the Old Faithful, to a video screen at the Old Faithful Visitor Education Center, or here in Mammoth at the Albright Visitor Center. Telling them a story about how our solid waste goes to a composting facility in West Yellowstone, and 65% of that becomes compost that we in turn reuse for revegetation projects in the park, has an impact on people. And so they're a little more conscientious, I think, with regard to what they put in a recycling bin versus what they put in a dumpster.
Education is just part of what the park is about, and just part of what the Yellowstone Park Foundation does.
We fund across the board in the park. So we fund under what we call our strategic initiatives, and Greenest Park is one of those, but we also fund projects under Wildlife Wonders and Wilderness. So wildlife research, you name it, whether it's wolves, bears, cougars, brown bats, elk, moose, we fund all of those wildlife research projects. We've been funding for the last 5 years a raptor study, which is going to end this year, and there's going to be a really wonderful report coming out on that. We also fund studies for archaeology. We also, for the archives, we have funded map digitization, and we fund interns. And when the building was built several years ago, we also provided the cases for artifacts, and we provided some of the other furniture in that too. complete the building. We also fund a lot of youth education programs. We fund the Yellowstone Conservation Corps, which is a program for 15 to 18-year-olds. There's 2 4-week segments in the summer, and it is a work, study, play program, but mostly they do a lot of trail restoration. In fact, one of the interesting things that they're doing right now is we've been funding bear boxes. Individuals can donate $1,500 and get a bear box in a camp, which is a place to put your food in that and keep the bears out. And there's also donor recognition on that bear box. It's your bear box. And the Yellowstone Youth Conservation Corps students are the ones who are placing those bear boxes in the campgrounds, so there's a good synergy there. We also fund Expedition Yellowstone, which is a program for 4th through 8th graders. They come into the park for 4 to 5 days. The focus has been primarily on local communities around the park and Native American reservations, but it is a national program, and there are classrooms that do come from around the country. It's a pre and post curriculum program, so it fits right into the school curriculum. And then there's distance learning. The park is doing a lot more of that. Rangers via Skype, telling classes about Yellowstone and reaching out and getting those new stewards for the park. So that's just some of the youth education programs that we fund. So our funding comes from individuals primarily. We have over 21,000 donors, and those donors are anywhere from $10 donors to $1 million donors. And then we have a very strong corporate partner program. So I mentioned Toyota, Michelin, we have Coca-Cola, we have Canon USA, and a number of partners that work with us. Anderson Windows and Doors has been a really strong partner. They put in several years ago energy efficient windows and doors at the Lamar Buffalo Ranch. They also did that at Mammoth Clinic last year. Kohler has provided all of the lavatory and kitchen sinks and facilities, appliances basically, all donated, various places in the park. And so we have a strong corporate partner program, but that is primarily, I would say, a technical service and product donation as opposed to cash grants, except there have been times with the Old Faithful Visitor Education Center, the foundation raised $15 million of the $27 million for that project and funded all of the exhibits and funded the auditorium and a library. And we had very strong corporate partners with that.
Our budget is flat, which means it actually goes down a little bit each year. Cost of labor, as well as very nominal inflationary cost, but regardless, it costs us a little more each year to run this place. And when the budget's essentially fixed, we got to look at other ways to affect that equation, if you will, as far as the cost of providing great visitor service and protecting resources.
For this week's Face the State, from Yellowstone National Park in the Lamar Valley, the Old Buffalo Ranch, I'm John Shearer, MTN News.
Thanks for watching Face the State. This has been a presentation of Montana's news station. Fair, accurate, to the point.